Parshas Shalach, Tavshin Pei Beis. You know, over the past years, when it comes to Parshas Shalach, so we've really spoken about many important inyanim, especially at the beginning of the Parsha, where we have the episode of the Meraglim. We spoke so much, first of all, about basically in general, watching what you say, watching what comes out of your mouth, speaking negatively, not just about people, but you see that the Meraglim spoke negatively about a land. They spoke about country, they spoke about Eretz Yisrael. So we've also expounded upon why it was so terrible and why it's worse than speaking about any other land to say a bad word about Eretz Yisrael. But essentially, the lessons that we learned were lessons of really watching what you think, what you say about other people, about other things, thinking before one speaks negatively about anything. And we really spoke about many of those things over the past few years. So when I look back at all the shiurim from the past few years, I realize that we really have another part of the Parsha. Parsha Shalach really stands out. You say, what is Parsha Shalach? Oh, it's the Meraglim, Eretz Yisrael, the first steps into Eretz Yisrael, going to check out the land, what they found, what they said. But at the end of the Parsha, we have a very important mitzvah that the Torah brings, the Torah speaks about in our Parsha. And it's one of these mitzvahs that we do every day, and we do it all the time, 7 days a week. We do this mitzvah, and sometimes we don't think more deeply into it, into what it represents, what it means to us, and what really we can get out of the mitzvah and how we can grow. And that's Pasha. That is the mitzvah of tzitzis. The end of this week's Parsha. Daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem v'yasu lahem tzitzis. That the mitzvah of tzitzis we speak about, and we find in this great mitzvah things that are extremely unique. And let me just list a couple of them. First of all, the fact that the Torah tells us, Uri'isem oisoi uzachartem is kol mitzvos Hashem, right? You look at the tzitzis, and many people have the minhag that when you say those words, you actually put the tzitzis over your eyes. And the Torah tells us that when you look at the tzitzis, you're somehow going to recall and you're going to remember all the mitzvahs of Hashem. You're going to remember all the mitzvahs. And you look and you remember somehow, you remember about all the mitzvahs. So what's going on over here? The Gemara, Masechta Menachos, Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph, tells us about people also. The Gemara talks about what is this looking at the tzitzis. Is tzitzis like some sort of segula to remember mitzvahs? Why a tzitzis different? Why doesn't it say that you look at some other mitzvah, your tefillin, whatever it is, and that you'll remember all the mitzvahs? So the Gemara says that the Gemara brings a couple different stories of people that when they were about to be over an avera and they saw their tzitzis and they stopped and they were held themselves back from doing an avera. And if we want to continue on also in the Parsha of Tzitzis, the Torah also says, V'yisem kedoshim, you're going to do the mitzvah of Tzitzis, and you're going to be kadosh. That the mitzvah of Tzitzis somehow brings us to Kedusha. Why would the mitzvah of Tzitzis bring us to Kedusha more than anything else? So two things are happening here, which we probably don't think about every day. We do the mitzvah of Tzitzis, it reminds us of all the other mitzvahs. And we do the mitzvah of tzitzis, and somehow it brings Kedusha onto ourselves. What is the connection between tzitzis and Kedusha? What is this milah, this big milah of the mitzvah of tzitzis? And the Medrash really gives us a hint. The Medrash gives us a mashal, and we have to really understand the mashal also, and how the mashal really explains it to us. But the Medrash, in the Medrash on our Parsha, the Medrash says that what is tzitzis compared to? Compared to if a person, imagine a person is on a boat and he's looking over, maybe he wants to watch the fish or something, I don't know what he wants to see, and a person falls overboard. and he's thrown overboard, whatever it is, he's in the ocean. And the captain of the ship sees this person struggling at sea. He sees this person struggling in the water. So what does the captain do? He goes to his life-saving equipment. He takes out his hatzala or chaverim, bikuchalim, whatever asken he is that day, and he takes a rope and he throws a rope overboard, and the person grabs onto the rope, and the captain of the ship says, listen, you hang on to this rope, because if you let go of the rope, if you're not tied onto the ship, you're going to sink, you're going to go down. So he instructs him to hold on to the rope. The Medrash tells us that's the mitzvah of tzitzis. Mitzvah of tzitzis has all these ropes, has these things, so we hang on to those mitzvahs, and that mitzvah of tzitzis is the rope, is the kesher that keeps us connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How we understand that exactly? That's what the Medrash says. And the Sifri tells us that kol hamikayim mitzvahs tzitzis ki'ilu kiyam kol haTorah kula. If you're mekayim the mitzvah of tzitzis, it's as if you were mekayim the whole Torah. And we learn it from that pasuk of Ureisa Moisa Uzachartem as kol mitzvahs Hashem, that you're going to see the tzitzis, you're being mekayim the mitzvah of tzitzis, you're going to look at them when you're being mekayim the mitzvah, and that it's kol mitzvahs Hashem alludes to the fact that if you're mekayim mitzvah tzitzis, it's as if you were mekayim kol haTorah kula, which is an amazing, fantastic thing. And we all know the gematria, the famous gematria of tzitzis plus the 8 strings and the 5 knots equals to 613. Now you might say, what, coincidence? But nothing's a coincidence. These things add up, and that's the extra credit in the Torah, where all these things and gematrias and all these things actually work out. So the mitzvah of tzitzis plus the 8 strings and the 5 knots adds up to 613. Once again, it encompasses all the mitzvahs in the Torah. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh, in our parsha, he says that you know what tzitzis are? Tzitzis really, they are an identifying tag. It's a seal, a special badge on a Jew that really proclaims, when you wear your tzitzis, it proclaims that you are an Eved Hashem. That's what Orach Chaim HaKadosh says. That's what tzitzis represents. That's our badge. That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to see. He's going to identify, Jews, right? And he sees a Yid wearing tzitzis. Oh, he's one of mine. A person's an Eved Hashem. And that's really Tosfos in Masechta Menachos, Daf Mem Gimel Amud Beis, says that. It speaks of tzitzis in that way, that it's a sign between HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we are an Eved Hashem. And it's for this reason, says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, and the Nesivos Shalom brings down, for this reason, that why don't we have tzitzis? Why is the mitzvah of tzitzis on all 4 corners? We should have to, you wear a baguette, you should hang one string off. Why all 4 corners of a baguette? Dr. Nesivos Shalom, that it represents the fact that what we're saying is, not only are we an Eved Hashem, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the king, and he rules over everything from all 4 corners of the world, not from one corner. All 4 corners of the world, wherever you are, east, north, south, west, wherever you are, it encompasses the domain which is under HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it also represents the word Echad. The word Echad says in Nesivos Shalom, the Aleph is 1, which means 1 baguette. The Ches is 8 strings, and the Dalet is the 4 corners. The word Echad, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is the only one, is 1 baguette, 8 strings, and 4 corners, and that's Echad. When we wear our tzitzis, we're proclaiming that not only are we Eved Hashem, but wherever we run and whatever we do, we are in the domain of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And just as the captain of that ship, as we said, it says as long as you hang on to that string, as long as you hang on to that rope, you have a chance, you have a lifeline. That's what the tzitzis are telling us. That as long as you hang on to that string, you have that kesher, that's our connection to V'atem hadveikim b'Hashem Elokeichem. that's how we connect. We're always looking for ways to connect HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So aside from the Pshat of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, aside from the Tosfos in Masechta Menachos, and from the Nesivos Shalom that tells us about the Echad, what's happening here is this is our way of connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by this wonderful mitzvah. And that is what tzitzis has over all the other mitzvahs in the Torah. We want to know why. V'sepes by tzitzis. You're going to see the tzitzis, u'zachartem, it's kol mitzvahs Hashem. And you can also get kedusha, v'yisam kedoshim, by tzitzis. Yes, because tzitzis represents everything about the way we look at our kesher to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is the sign and the kesher between Hashem and Klal Yisrael. And because tzitzis is that kesher, that's why it has the segula of reminding us of all the other mitzvahs too. The Nesivos Shalom tells us that although the mitzvah is actually to have tzitzis on the four corners of our beged, it's interesting to note the way we perform the mitzvah. How do we perform the mitzvah? You put on a talis in the morning. By Ashkenazim, when married, Svardim put on before the marriage, whatever. But the mitzvah of tzitzis is that you take the tzitzis and you wrap it. We have atifat, right? Tzitzis, talis. You take the talis and we wrap it around ourselves. Lehis atef, the bracha is to wrap yourself in the tzitzis. And that represents the point that we have been talking about. You take the tzitzis, the talis, which has tzitzis, and you show that it encompasses our whole being. It encompasses our whole body. The same way we're proclaiming that the four corners of the world, we're saying that we're taking these four corners of the world and we're wrapping it totally around us. So while the mitzvah might be to wear and to have tzitzis, the way we perform the mitzvah shows what we're feeling about it. How we want to take the HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the whole world from all four corners of the world and wrap it totally, to pull the sign and the seal and the badge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and wrap it all around ourselves. The Taryag mitzvahs, as we know, are keneged the 613 limbs and of a person, right? You have mitzvahs aseh, mitzvahs lo aseh. They add up together. They add up to 613. We take all the Taryag mitzvahs and we wrap it around ourselves. We take the tzitzis, which add up to 613, and we wrap it around our limbs, which are also 613, and we wrap it around from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what represents our connection, our kesher to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's how we start our day. That's how we get ourselves going, by proclaiming that is our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is why the mitzvah of tzitzis adds kedusha to us too. It adds kedusha. Why mitzvah of tzitzis? V'yisam kedoshim. That is why, because when we wrap ourselves with the tzitzis, what we're doing and we're saying is that we dedicate our entire being, our entire self, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu more than any other mitzvah. You don't have another mitzvah, really, a mitzvah in the Torah. Tefillin, we put on tefillin, sukkah, we go in a sukkah. All these mitzvahs, each one we do with part of whatever but we take the mitzvah of tzitzis is unique in the fact what it represents, all taryag, everything, and we wrap it all around ourselves. Memela, once we do that, and we have the Atam Advekim, and we're connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so more than any other mitzvah, that's what brings about the Kedusha. So now you're going to come tomorrow morning, and you're going to put on your talis, you're going to put on your tzitzis, you're going to do this mitzvah, and you're going to say, well, you know, I've been doing this hundreds of thousands of times like a robot, but now you're going to understand what's going on over here. That we're telling HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we want to hang on to that lifeline. That kesher, those strings, that's our lifeline. That's what we want to hang on to. And we should be zoicha to all the brachas that come to a person that does the mitzvah of tzitzis. We should be zoicha to remember all the mitzvahs, to have the schar of all the mitzvahs. We should be zoicha that shetaka bring more kedusha onto ourselves. The lessons that we learned from the end of this week's parsha, from the parsha of tzitzis.